I would say I do it more now as an editor, like, because I'm not writing anymore, but I still do have control over the story flow. And, one narrative that I've really enjoyed returning to time and time again is, we've had the longest 50-50 US Senate in history, which people don't really stop to appreciate.
Mm.
I suppose people in the White House stop to appreciate it all the time because they're constantly saying, Joe Biden doesn't get enough credit for doing what he did with total Democratic control because the Democrats barely controlled the US Senate. And it's not like the filibuster wasn't there, yet they managed to do a lot. And I'm not just referring to, what we call the Inflation Reduction Act, this massive tax, healthcare, and climate bill that ate up a lot of ink. They passed a gun bill, they passed an infrastructure bill, they passed a microchips bill, and all these were pretty significant in and of themselves. So the reason why I point this out is that it's a narrative worth returning to because we are now going to have the closest margin to even in the US House in multiple generations. We're going to have a House that looks a lot like the Senate. I mean, we talk about divided government, but it's a wonderful time to be a Congress nerd because we're in like the most divided of divided government starting next year. So that's a narrative that as a boss in the news, like I think it's really important that we return to consistently. As a reporter, looking back to those days, probably the biggest narrative for me was during my 6 years on climate, Keystone XL. It's a name that people don't necessarily know too well, but it was a huge deal for, particularly the last term of Obama. I encountered Keystone XL on my first day as a climate politics reporter in 2010, when every other reporter in town was talking about a massive oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. And I was kind of the new girl sitting in the corner, like, oh, I want something to do. And my editor at the time, Cy Zaneski, who was a Knight Ridder guy from Miami, he puts this press release on my desk and he says, I think you should look at this pipeline. People are really mad about it. And I said, okay, a pipeline? All right. Because it just wasn't sexy. It wasn't the big story. I wanted to tour the oil rig, 6 years later, it's the reason why Politico hired me. And so when I talk to journalism students today and they ask for advice, it's narrative related. I say, find a storyline that really, really sets you on fire and just don't let it go. Become the expert on this particular storyline because you will be surprised. Even after that storyline fades, like it gives you tools and understanding of patterns of how people wield power and make policy that are going to be relevant for the rest of your career.